Welcome back. This is the third video on the book of Ruth, and we're going to begin today in Ruth chapter 1, verse 11. If you remember our previous video, we found out that Elimelech was the richest man, was a very rich man in the nation of Israel, a Bible scholar deluxe, a great person. And there was a famine, and he left the land. He must have got tired of people coming to him for counseling, come to borrow money, come ask him for food, things like this. And so he uproots his family, takes his wife and two children, Malchalon and Kilion. Malchalon means sickness, and Kilion means finished. And so why would you name your kid Finished? If you had 14 children, and you might name the 14th one, I'm done. But anyway, the boys had died. They had married down in Moab. One of them married Ruth. The other one married Orpha. And so they had died and left the two widows with with Naomi. And Naomi was on her way back to Israel. She told the two girls, "You stay here in your native land. I'm going home. My family will take care of me there." The two girls said, "We'll go with you. We'll go with you." And she says, "No, you go back to your own people and you stay with them." So we're beginning in verse 11. Now Naomi said, "Return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought it was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand has gone out against me." This gives us a remembrance back to the Levirate marriage. In the laws given in Leviticus, we have what's called a Levirate marriage. Even Jesus dealt with that with a question or two about that in his day. It went kind of like this: if a man dies and without having children, and when it says children, it really means a son. If a man dies without having children, then his brother is to take his widow and have sex with her, marry her, have sex with her, but the children are not his; they are descendants of his brother. And it's so that we can keep his brother's lineage going. Now, today that does not exist, and but in those days it did and was perfectly fine. Naomi says, even if I go home now and find another husband and I get pregnant now, are you going to wait until that boy grows up and marry him? Are you going to wait? Now, assuming as of today that these boy Macalon and Kilion married when they were about 20, and they'd already been married 10 years, and the girls were the same age. So let's just say that both of these women are in their 30s. If Ruth was to have a baby and that baby boy grows on up, or not Ruth, but Naomi was to have a baby, and that baby grows up till he's 20, now these women are going to be in their 50s because they're 30, they're 30 years ahead of him. Are you going to wait until another 20 years till you can marry one of my sons? Let's be practical here. If you're going to have a family, if you're going to have children, you need to stay here where you can find a relative, find somebody here for you. And she's very practical. It says in verse 13, would you wait? Would you remain unmarried? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you. Why would it be more bitter for Ruth? Because she has no descendants. She does not have any children left. She has no descendants. How sad. The decision of the father to leave the land, the father dies, the two sons die, Naomi is left with nothing and nobody to take care of her, no direct relative. She does have cousins and she does have distant relatives. We'll find that out later, and we really don't know now about whether they're her husband's relatives or hers. But she says that the Lord's hand has gone out against me. The decisions that were made back in chapter 1, verse 1, those decisions that were made had an effect 30 years later. Would have an effect 30 years later. We're now 10 years or so after this decision in verse 1 to leave the land. But let's just say the decisions cost you in the long run. You better make sure that the decision that you make for you and your family, make sure that that decision is the right one. Well, how do we make sure these decisions are the right one? Well, it's called fast and pray. It's also called study the Word of God. The Word of God will not contradict itself. God will not tell you one day to do this and the next day to do that. God will impress upon you to do certain things. And so you need to be close enough to God to hear. Now back to chapter 1, verse 14. So the girls all gathered together in a group hug. She kissed them, and they wept and they kissed and they hugged, and it says, and they, at this point they wept again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Now this phrase, clung to her, meant that Ruth felt within her heart that she was supposed to go with Naomi back to the land. But look what Naomi says in verse 15. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people and her gods. So she's going back to her people. She's going back to the land of Moab. She's going back to those cast idols. She's going back to the carved images. She's going back to whatever she is. Okay? She's going back to her people and to her gods. There's a comma there, and it says, go back, or pardon me, there's a period there. And so now we have a command from Naomi to Ruth, go back with her. You need to stay here. Why would Naomi say that? Naomi is going to go to Israel. There's quite a strife between Israel and Moab. There's a big difference between the two, and we'll talk about that next time.